Doing good. I am not in this league. I've done a lot of.
And I am back with another set of power rankings. Today we're going to be going through the Wigglytuff Battle Guild Wi-Fi Division power rankings, and I am joined today by my friend Ryan, who is not in the league. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing good. I am not in this league. I've done a lot of PRs though over the many years of draft I've played. So very excited to be here and do another PR video.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like having an outside perspective for someone who is not involved in the draft board. But before we get into the power rankings, let's talk a little bit about how it is that we rated all of these teams. So we didn't want to take into account coach and play style at all because that would sort of take away from the effect of the power rankings. We're ranking the teams purely on how the teams were drafted, not how we expect them to finish based on the coach. If you inserted Wolf Glick with the worst team in this power rankings, you would still probably expect a top 4 finish in this league, sort of thing. And we rated them as if 100 equally skilled players were given each of them and then played in a giant round robin, how we would expect the final standings to shake out. So that's how we take out the coach and play style. And a higher ranking doesn't necessarily mean that I think that team should be favored over a lower rated one. The example I used is if the number 2 team could be a 60% favorite over the number 1 team, but if against the rest of the field the number 1 team has a 60% win rate and the number 2 has a 54% win rate, the number 1 team would still be number 1, even if it was an underdog to number 2 specifically. Do you have anything you want to add about our methodology, Ryan?
Yeah, a few other things, but especially because Gen 9 teams in particular get very power crept and very strong. None of the teams that at least that we ranked in these PRs I thought were weak, as in like the Mons were weak or that kind of thing. A lot of the ranking I think this time just came down to team construction. What pieces did you grab? How do they mesh with each other? It was a lot more about like composition rather than power, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will add that this division had a very, very forgiving draft board, so I don't think that there are any bad teams because you just had a lot of points compared to what the points could get you, so there was a lot of flexibility with drafting. With that being said, our number 12 team is the Green Bay Pikachus, and they're going to be my week 1 opponent, so I don't actually want to talk too much about this team. So Ryan, why don't you tell us what you think about the Green Bay Pikachus?
Yeah, so I do want to start, even though this is the lowest ranked team, I do want to start with the positives. I think, like, the overall core of the team is pretty good in terms of, like, on paper, you have a Firewater Grass core with the Amoonguss Milotic Arcanine. You've got, technically, a Dragon Fairy Steel core with 2 Pokemon with the Roaring Wind Klefki, which is nice. Raichu's a nice support mon. Braviary is, I think, a little underrated in the current formats. It hits like a truck. Sheer Force boosted, Life Orb boosted, Psychics and things like that. They just are nuclear. Riolu's a prankster Pokemon, and that's always good to add to a team. Frostmoth can be deceptive. It is a little bit of a Terra Sync, in my opinion, where you're going to want to Terra it to get the most out of it, but it is very powerful, and Ice Scales is a very, very good ability. Palo-Sand is an okay ground type for the team, gives you a ghost type as well, gives you kind of some nice switch-ins for a couple defensive things, and then Greedent is kind of a slow anti-TR mon. You'll set up with Belly Drum, Cheek Pouch, that kind of thing. That's typically what Greedent does. The overall comp is fine. The main things that I would critique about this team are, and kind of why it ended up here. Let me check my notes. One of the main things, and I don't mean this in necessarily a mean way, but a lot of the picks feel pretty underwhelming in terms of like overall power or attention that you need in prep. Milotic has done okay this gen in draft that I've seen, but it's not outstanding. Arcanine is good, but its base offensive stats aren't enough. Like a lot of this team's like offensive pressure, in my opinion, is carried by that Roaring Moon and a little bit of the Arcanine Braviary, and I don't think that that's going to really be enough, especially this generation with that much power. The other thing that I was running into with this one is that you can absolutely run, essentially opposing speed control is very good into this team on the whole. Yes, you have Klefki and you have redirection and you have potential tailwind and things like that. But like at the end of the day, the speed tiers on this team do not look very good compared to other teams, and you don't have an immediacy of speed control on this team. You do have Trick Room, you have Thunderwave, you have Tailwind, but I don't think any of those are as reliable as we're seeing from a lot of teams above it. So I think this team has an issue where I think it can get kind of speed blitzed by teams that can control the board state a lot more securely. I think the matchup into faster offense is good, but it's not the but it's not ideal. I think the TR matchup's a lot better. But I don't think it's going to be that hard to play around Amoonguss and Greedent if you are going hard TR. Like, you can definitely plan and prep around those mons pretty effectively. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, I think the team is solid. It is lacking some damage punch. I think the Braviary and the Roaring Moon are really going to carry that. But overall, it's a bit of a low damage team. Amoonguss is interesting. I found it a bit more underwhelming this generation than last generation, even in draft, because there's just so many tools that teams can have to get around the Amoonguss. If you see your opponent's going to have the Amoonguss, you're going to have safety goggles on probably at least one thing in prep. Terra Grass lets you just ignore basically everything that it does a lot of the time. And Terra Grass gets punished, obviously, by Roaring Moon Arcanine, but I just think that overall, this team's damage output is lacking a bit compared to some of the other teams, and that's why I also had it relatively low on my rankings for this division.
Yeah, to be clear, we both did separate rankings and then combined the averages to get the PRs, so.
Yeah. But I think with that, we can move on to our next team, where we've got the Winnipeg Blue Blastoise with an absolutely awesome logo. So, looking at this team, it's got great support with the Whimsicott, Scrafty, damage output in the Dragapult, Volcarona, Terrakion, Primarina, some control with the Foongus, and then it's also got Lapras, Gothorita, which is pretty underrated, Elekid, and Meditite. So first with the good on this team, this is obviously what I mean by we're talking about a very high-powered, very forgiving draft board, because this type of team is usually not a team that gets ranked number 11 in power rankings. When you've got the Whimsicott support, and then you've got the beat-up mode with the Terrakion. I am a big fan of Primarina. It does so much damage, even in this generation. Volcarona gives you some setup options, some secondary redirection if you want to go that way. Dragapult is incredibly fast and it can do some decent damage. Scrafty is a good pivot style Pokemon with Intimidate Fake Out. So overall, the team has a bit more immediate damage output than the previous team, and it's got some modes. This team has some more defined modes that it can go with, especially that Whimsicott Terrakion mode. But I think where this team's weakness is that it is a very, very top-heavy team. Like, the first 6 Pokemon on this team are fantastic. Maybe 7 if you want to count Foongus as an anti-Trick Room Pokemon. Gothorita's decent, but Lapras, Elekid, and Meditite are really going to struggle to find value with this team. And if you're prepping for 6 or 7 Pokemon as opposed to 10 to 12 Pokemon, I think that really changes the dynamic of what you can be expecting out of the team. Like, there's no doubt that it's got powerful pieces, a powerful node, and better damage, but I just think that it falls short compared to some other teams, especially when it comes to depth and defenses. But what do you think, Ryan?
I have a couple things. First off, I do see you with the Primarina Lapras Gothorita Perish mode, because that's like a thing.
Yes,
like that's why that was drafted.
It's technically a thing, yes.
Liquid Voice, Perish Song, into your Water Absorb Lapras. Like, it's cool. Like, the tech is cool. I don't think it's gonna work that well though. Personally, because of the shared typing between the Primarina and the Lapras. I think that, like, yes, you can Terra around that, but I don't think that that's going to work as well in practice. It's very fun, though, and I do appreciate a fun mode. I'm not saying get rid of it, but I do want to comment. I at least know why those pieces are there. There's a little bit of an Eviolite pressure too between Fungus and Gothorita. It's not a huge deal. I don't think you're bringing both on the same week most of the time anyway. But they do kind of make up important pieces of that Trick Room mode. Um, so there might be weeks where you want both. One of my big things with this team is this might sound like a weird critique, but it doesn't have a booster Pokemon, like a booster energy Pokemon. And that feels really weird in this particular generation of draft, where because booster gives you just a lot of immediacy on the field, and my biggest complaint with this team is that I think it's got very good mons, but it doesn't have a lot of immediate pressure. Like Dragapult's offensive stats have really been kind of outstripped this gen. And Volcarona's offensive stats are okay, but you still ideally would get it set up, or you'd get, your fake tears off with it, and that's okay. That's like some solid immediacy. Terrakian's good, but Terrakian's also not the fastest boy around anymore. And if you're attacking with Terrakion turn 1, or trying to get Tailwind set up so it outspeeds something, you're not beating it up with Whimsicott, so you're losing that damage output. Specs Prim obviously has good immediacy and things like that, especially in Tailwind. But my point is that I think that the setup for your damage, a lot of it is 2-turn setup, in my opinion. And it's hard for you to just come on the field and be immediately instantly threaten a KO, especially if the opposing Pokemon are just naturally faster. Or if your Whimsicott can get Prankster taunted or faked out or whatever, because you can't actually account for both Prankster taunt and fake out on a Whimsicott unless you're willing to Terra it, which is not, I don't think, the most advisable. So that's kind of my big thing with this team, is just that element of the team is kind of missing, in my opinion. I also think that some of the shared typings kind of actually cause some really nasty type weakness overlap. In Terra formats, I don't care as much about defensive synergy, but if you look at those top mons, the Whimsicott, Primarina are both sharing that fairy type, and then you have Scrafty, Dragapult, and Terrakion, which all have a shared fairy weakness. And then it starts being oh, okay, well, I can, this is a team where Terra Fairy and Terra Poison both look really strong. And that's not something I love to say. Terra Fairy weak teams especially can really struggle in these kind of Terra formats. So I think it's a good team overall, but those kind of things kind of compounded to where I'm worried about it into especially some of the high-end teams that have that immediacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to our number 10 team, I think we had a bit of disagreement here, and I think you liked this team more than I did, so I'll let you talk about it first.
Yeah. I like this team a lot because it has Iron Hands, which is the best on Gen 9 draft. Anyway, the team's Iron Hands, Landorus, Ursulina, Latias, Oranguru, Rubambi, Sylveon, Shiftry, and then Poltergeist. This team is it's a little one note, but damn is it a strong note. It's got it's basically got a Trick Room mode with the Iron Hands, Ursulina, Oranguru, Sylveon. And that alone is that's a lot of bulk you have to play through. And that's a lot of power you have to play through. You're getting Landorus support on that as well with the Intimidates, that I think are a little more unreliable in draft than Standard Ladder, but still solid. And it can do okay damage. And then you also have the Landorus Latias, which I like, because that gives you a Levitate Mon to click Earthquake with, which is fun. And then you have Rubambi Speed Swap stuff as well, which can always be fun. And that can do okay. I think it's a little gimmicky. I don't think it's actually going to come up all that much. It's also an okay partner for Iron Hands, just in general. But I'm not 100% on how well that's going to do. Shiftry and Poltergeist, other than Shiftry having Fake Out, I don't know what it's doing here. I would honestly, if possible, combine the points for those two mons into one thing to give you an additional niche.
They're already at the minimum number of mons allowed on the team.
Okay. So never mind then. But those two felt a little out of place. I think the team is overall good, in construction. and I think it has a lot of output. It's got pretty clearly defined stuff it's going for. I do think that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses of the team, though, is that it's a little bit like you pretty much know what's going to happen. On like the second the opponent, like you lead with this team, the opponent goes, yeah, okay, this is what's about to go down. And if your opponent actually flowcharts well into that, you're actually going to have a lot of huge problems, in my opinion. If the opponent is able to like pretty accurately predict what you're going for or what your plan is. But this is a team where I can see we don't consider coach play style when we do these PRs, but I do think that like if you're really good with this archetype of team, I think that it can perform really, really well. So I did rank this team a little bit higher than Dan, but I'm okay with, I think, where it ended up, if that's where it ended up. Iron Hands is a beast, though. You said it made it all the way to Wheel?
Yeah, this team had the last pick, and they went Iron Hands, Landers T. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, no. In most drafts I've been in, Iron Hands is like a top three pick.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said about this team. It obviously has, the immediacy with Iron Hands, Landorus T, and setup options with both of those. And Ursaluna does a lot of damage as well. One thing that I think with this team is you said on the lead, it's pretty obvious what this team's going to do. I'd take that even a step further. On team preview, you're going to have a good idea on what this team's going to be trying to do for all 3 games. And I just think that that's a bit of a weakness against a skilled opponent who's going to be able to diagnose that early. And if they've prepped well and have some good flowcharts, they're going to have basically 3 to 4 turns of designed counterplay at the beginning of the game that's going to put them in pretty good position. They're still going to have to chew through a lot of bulk, a lot of potential techs, but I think that this is the team in the league that it has a lot of power. It's got the power to be a top 5 team, but it's also just so much easier to flowchart against than basically any other team in the league that it's a weird juxtaposition there. And I always think, especially come playoff times when people are putting in a lot of time to get their flowcharts right, a team like this is more likely to falter than some of the teams ahead of it, despite just the obvious immense power that this team has. And I'll add on to that, there's a lot of type redundancy on this team. That leads to some shared weaknesses. It's not the biggest deal in the world in a Terra format, but it is something that's a bit of a slight knock against it as well.
Yeah, I did note in my thing that, having shared typings among most of your team, like on a team that only has this many Pokemon in the first place, that was actually a pretty big knock for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll take on team number 9 here. I'll take this one first, and I didn't really put anyone else's Grace transactions here, but I did want to put these up, and I'll be talking about why in a little bit. But you got Incineroar, Goldango, Suicune, Ogerpon, Landorus, that's the incarnate form, Gardevoir, Glastrier, Luxray, Hisuian, Sneasel, and Fletchling. So, again, a lot of really individually strong Pokemon. This is a very high power level draft that was allowed given the points and the tier structure. Goldango, Landorus are great special breakers. Ogerpon with Defiant has the opportunity to set up or be a redirection bot, so it's got a lot of flexibility in its role. Suicune has a bulky Tailwind setter, or Fletchling with priority Tailwind give you some different speed controls. Incineroar is going to give you a decent pivot. And then it's got a decently undercosted Trick Room mode with the 11-point Gardevoir, and I think that was an 8-point Glastrier, which is just an absolute steal. So there's a lot of powerful things going on in this team. I think it lacks a bit of sustained damage as opposed to the immediate damage, and a really strong special wall into this team, maybe some sort of bulky water type, is really going to provide a lot of issues for some of its primary damage output. But what I really wanted to talk about in this team was the grace period transactions, because I am not a fan. Like, if this team, instead of Suicune, Gardevoir, Luxray, Fletchling, had Latios Palafin, which at 11 points was the best value Pokemon in this draft, and 7-point Jolteon, this is probably a top 5 team for me. Like,
oh yeah, easy.
This team, I think, got considerably worse in Grace, and I know that they really wanted to get a Trick Room setter, and that's why they got rid of the Latios and wanted to pick up the Gardevoir and made the other transactions the way they did. But I don't know. I think that it was. I think the Grace transactions this team made were a mistake because the Latios, Palafin, and Jolteon would fix up basically every problem that I had with this team, and it would have vaulted well into the top 5, maybe even the top 3 teams. But what do you think, Ryan?
Okay, I do want to talk about this. I don't always love discussing these kind of things but I do want to like give advice essentially for this coach in terms of like if they play future draft seasons, that sort of thing. So first off, my piece of advice is Gardevoir's bad at setting Trick Room. It's actually really bad at it, and it's not good at imprisoning it either. I actually used Gardevoir for a whole season fairly recently, and it wasn't my only Trick Room mon, but every time I tried to make it do that role, it failed miserably, because it's got, like, horrid HP and physical defense. So you would just be like, oh, I want to click Trick Room, and then you get Rock Slided, and then it wasn't going to happen. And it's got a really wonky speed tier to deal with too. For a mon like it is, it's not a bad Pokemon overall, but like when you're losing Latios and Palafin to enable this mode, it's not worth it. Your team as it stood before, yes, it did not have a Trick Room setter, and I would often consider that a problem. But you have a team that was at the time actually really suited to stall TR. Incineroar, Goldango, Palafin are all really good Pokemon to just stall a TR. And Ogerpon with Follow Me, like you could actually stall a TR mode really effectively with a team like that. So for reference, I would have knocked you for not having a TR Mon probably, but I would have been fairly confident that you can play around it fairly effectively with a team like that with this composition. Especially with like a room service Incin, which is really fun in draft. Mm-hmm. Now I did rate the team though as it was. I did not consider the Grace stuff. I just rated the team that was in front of me when I was rating this team, and the team in front of me is pretty good. It's certainly not bad. I think my big thing with this team is just the speed tiers on it actually kind of get in the way as to where it can get pretty fast, and especially, Ogerpon can Terra, and that really can help a lot if you want to get something like super fast going. But I do think that the Landorus, I think it's but Landorus and Ogerpon are kind of your fastest mons off the bat, and in a format where a lot of Pokemon have booster, I don't super think that's gonna fly. I think, like I mentioned, Gardevoir's a really unreliable Trick Room setter, and even in Prison Trick Room setter. So that combination's not great. Suicune's a very good Tailwind setter, but it's also a mid-speed Tailwind setter, so it's like a low mid-speed Tailwind setter. So into other good Tailwind, it's going to get kind of halted. And those things all kind of compound to where you have a team that is very, the construction and the typings and everything actually work pretty well on this team. I don't have a lot of issues in that front, but I don't think Fletchling does enough to help with that, and I think that you could actually take the Sneasel Hisui is a good mon, but Incin I feel like does almost everything that mon does, but better. You could take the Sneasel Hisui Fletchling role and maybe try to get something that kind of fills that gap a little better, instead of having both of those separate. And that sort of and Luxray is doing some work here, I guess. It's okay. But I don't think you needed that robust of a change for your team. And I think that the team as it stands is good, but not... but a lot of the other teams that just have better tools and more reliable tools in the support area, I think are going to do really well into this. So what do you think?
Yeah, and one thing I'll add, something that would have fixed a lot of the problems that you were talking about, the speed tiers and consistency of speed control, a base 130 Pokemon with Electro Web, like Jolteon, would actually have just been completely awesome on this team.
Would have really helped a lot.
As much as I love Latios and Palafin, Jolteon might have actually been the biggest loss for this team. It was probably Palafin, but Jolteon over Latios.
This team.
But Jolteon, I don't think like, I don't want to undersell the Jolteon, though. It would have very much helped with a lot of the speed control issues that this team could end up having, despite its consistent Tailwind modes. Having the speed to abuse the Tailwind, I do think the Jolteon could have helped with. But like we said, it's a very solid team as it is. It just was an outstanding team, and now it's just merely a solid team in my perspective. But again, if you disagree and you want to explain why you made those, I love interaction in the comments section below, and that is not just a plug for me to get better interaction.
Dan does get flamed a lot in all his videos, so please flame him.
Yeah, it happens a lot. But since, me. No, flame Ryan. I'll link his channel in the description below.
Oh God.
I'll let you handle the next team, the Olympic Flygon.
Yeah, so this team, Fluttermane, Ninetales, Heatran, Baxcalibur, Rhyperior, Pachu, Risu, Medicham, Cottonee, Beartick, Mabostiff. Dan, I'm getting it right for once. I checked. Cottonee does not get Tailwind this gen. Yay! So it's not Prankster Tailwind. It is still a good trick. It is still a good Prankster mon. This team is pretty good with a lot of weird type things going on, is essentially my opinion on it. It's got a Hail mode with the Ninetales Beartick. It does feel a little tacked on in that sense. I think the Ninetales Baxcalibur is going to be the much more viable kind of Hail-y sort of mode. Fluttermane's obviously phenomenal. Heatran's a very good Pokemon as well. One thing that I will comment, though, is that Fluttermane, Heatran, and Baxcalibur are all mons that really like Terra. These are all Pokemon where you're going to want to Terra with them. Fluttermane has some natural weaknesses on the physical side that you are going to want to potentially Terra out of, or you're going to want to Terra to get more damage. Heatran has some natural 4X weaknesses you're going to want to work around. Baxcalibur's offensively really strong, but defensively has a really poor typing, so you often will like Terra Poison to get out of that. So there's a little bit of like a bit of an issue where you have 3 of your top mons all kind of really want Terra, and also do share some type weaknesses among them. And that can kind of sting a little bit. Like ground steel coverage looks just really good into a lot of this team. Pachirisu was a fairly cheap redirector, and I do like it, especially with some of the other mons on the team. I think it can work okay, but you're not getting the full use out of it because you don't have anything that's like super electric weak on this team at all. Medicham is very powerful for its tier. It's actually one of my favorite picks on the draft. I think that it not only does it have a lot of utility, it has a lot of power, it gives you a fake out mon. I think all of that's really good. Mabostiff was also pretty low tiered. I think for like a bulky Intimidate support mon, it's pretty good. Cottonee is good as a Prankster mon, but it doesn't get Tailwind, so that's why it's not as good as Whimsicott. But it does have some really nice tools, especially where, Cottonee still has fake tiers, so you can like fake tiers and then Fluttermane and just win a game, basically. Yeah. I think this team has a lot of good immediacy, which is something that we've talked about on a couple of other teams. I do think this team has good immediacy. I think the problem is that if it can't capitalize on that immediacy like quickly, it is going to get overwhelmed. Because of its issues regarding typing and issues regarding typing that even Terra can't fully let you get around. Like, Terra helps, but it's not going to fully fix that. And I do think while Fluttermane is incredibly fast, and you've got a Hail mode that's not unfast, the rest of the team is very like mid-speed, and I do think that's going to hurt you quite a bit.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for me with this team is the lack of good speed control, because the damage potential of this team is incredibly high. There are some defensive issues that, if you're just moving faster and killing all the other Pokemon, aren't really going to pop up as much, but if the opponent's going to have speed control against you, then you're going to have a lot of Terra pressure, like you said, with the Fluttermane, Heatran, Baxcalibur, and even Rhyperior. I know you and I both ran a Baxcalibur at a regional, so we both understand the power of that Pokemon and what it can do. So it is an incredibly potent threat to pair with something like that Fluttermane. But when your best form of speed control is Cottonee Cotton Spore or Fluttermane Trick Room, I think there's going to be some
or
issues
Icy Wind
where
Fluttermane.
Yeah, I guess Icy Wind's Fluttermane as well. But there's definitely going to be some issues where you're not doing the damage that you want to be doing necessarily because your team is moving second and you're being forced to play defensively to try and stall out the opponent's speed, as opposed to moving first and trying to beat down the other team, which is what I think this team wants to do. So if this team made a couple transactions and just added a more consistent Trick Room setter, or more specifically a really good Tailwind setter, I think it shoots up my rankings at least, because it's very toolsy, but it's going to have to play more defensively than it wants to with the number of quad weaknesses that are on the team right now.
Yeah, there are a lot. I think you covered it.
Yep, and we'll move on to the Columbus Cabalions. So, this team is very top-heavy, and its top-heavy is very good. It's got Urshifu, Rillaboom, Talonflame, Gothitelle, Raikou, and to some extent Archaludon as well. And it's a very good balanced team with consistent Tailwind from the Talonflame, incredible physical output from the Urshifu and the Rillaboom. Gothitelle always proves its worth in draft because it can set Trick Room, it can trap people into unfavorable matchups, it can just do a lot of things. Raikou is a great little tweener support, sometimes attacking Pokemon, and I think those 6 are going to come a lot. The Piloswine, Hisuian Quillfish, Alchemy, and Dewpider I don't think are quite as good as the rest of the team and aren't going to be coming that much. Maybe with the exception is if they can get some good Decorate sets coming out of that Alchemy, but I'm not a huge believer of it in draft at this point. But it's got good type balance in its core, it's got good output balance in its core and good immediacy, but I think for me the big issue with this team is its core is very, very solid, but it doesn't really have the complementary pieces that I like to see to help patch up certain things if people are able to flowchart well into the core. And even though Gothitelle's a really good Trick Room setter, you don't really have anything that wants to take advantage of Trick Room outside of that Piloswine. But what do you think about the Columbus Cabalions, Ryan?
Yeah, I really like this team. This feels very similar to the type of team that I would draft, especially early on in my draft career. I really like a lot of the pieces on this team. Raikou also got a lot of good move pool buffs this gen in terms of its support set, having Electro Web, having Inner Focus, Electro Web, and Snarl and Eerie Impulse. That's going to be so nice. And then you combine that with having good offensive pressure. I'm super excited to see how that mon does. Archaludon is okay on this team. I personally think that that's a mon that's going to really excel on Rain for kind of obvious reasons, but as it stands, I do actually think it's a pretty good addition to the team, and it's one of the only mons. It's a very slight critique, but one of my few critiques of this team is there's nothing abusing the terrain the Rillaboom is setting. And you absolutely could have some good Unburden users or some good a secondary grass type that can get a lot out of that grassy terrain. It does feel a little weird that it's you have the potential to make a full mode out of that, and it's just kind of a feature on the team. I don't think it's bad though. I think it's good as it is. Goth is good. You've talked about Trick Room, but it can do a lot of other stuff too. It's just generally an excellent support Pokemon in every facet. It's very solid. I do like the low tier picks a little better than you do. Piloswine is, I think, has done really well in draft. It does have a little bit of anti-synergy with the Rillaboom because the grassy terrain will weaken its earthquakes, that kind of thing. But it's definitely a solid mon. I've seen it perform really well in draft. Quillfish Isui just getting low tier Intimidate, great. I'm not going to complain about that. And it's got some other good stuff, features. Alcremie, I would agree with you. I think Alcremie is going to be really unreliable at getting a Decorate off this gen. And this team doesn't really have any redirection or anything like that to assist with that. But I do think that it could be really good. Dewpider's fun. I don't think it's going to come very much, but it's fun. I think the main thing with this team, the fast mode's good. The fast offensive mode with that top core is very good, and then it just kind of loses me a bit. I think it could have used some prankster support wouldn't be bad. Like I mentioned, something to pair with Rilla that's a little bit more of a clear partner would be nice. I think the Trick Room mode is a little weak. There are a couple teams, especially that are above it, that have stronger TR options, and I do think that is going to come up. But I think it's solid. I can see this team doing pretty well. I think the special output also it's not bad, but it could be lacking. Raikou doesn't hit the hardest specially, so you're really relying on Arcaludon for a lot of that. Talonflame can run special obs, but you're not but you don't want to every time. So I do think that like your special output's going to be interesting because we're kind of in untested waters with a few of those mons in terms of how well they're going to do in terms of that output.
Yeah, and I think going back to our methodology, this is a pretty interesting example. If you look at the Cobalions and then you compare them to the Nidokings, I think the Nidokings with their Trick Room mode would actually be a favorite in a head-to-head matchup with this team. But I do think that this team, if you're not playing against a very hard Trick Room team, is going to have a better general matchup than the Nidokings and do everything else.
Yeah, for sure.
But moving on, we've got team number 6, and it's got Iron Jugulus, so I'll let you take this team.
I love Iron Jugs, one of my favorite Pokemon. I don't know how much I love it on this team, but I do love Iron Jugs. I'll get to that. Qianpao, Dragonite, Arcanine, Hisui, Iron Jugs, Metagross, Thwackey, Spectrier, Torterra, Duocean. I mean, it's got Pau Knight. That alone, you're pairing it with an Arcanine as well. Like, that's just a lot of really annoying stuff to deal with.
And
I
Bullet
also
Punch
actually
Metagross.
think Qianpao Metagross is also going to be very, very strong. I'm glad that the team has centered a fair bit of its like offensive pressure around that. I also think that having Qianpao is really going to help Arcanine also kind of pack a little bit more punch, which will be really good for it, because I do think that mon's pretty solid. Iron Jugs is one of my favorite Paradox mons in draft specifically. It can kind of play both ways. A lot of people use it as kind of a Tailwind bot, like supportive Tailwind bot with Snarl. And I do imagine that's how this team is mostly going to be using it. It's also just a generally very good Terra candidate. Dark Flying typing isn't bad, but Jugs gets pretty good coverage, and it's actually a really solid mon to Terra Fire or Terra Ground in a lot of matchups in my experience. So I do think that could be really fun with it. I do think, though, that the one thing with the Iron Jugs, though, is that it's got that Dark Flying typing on a team with Qianpao Dragonite as the top 2 mons. So the opponent doesn't have to tack a lot of extra coverage to hit Iron Jugs, which is a slight concern. And then Spectrier is very powerful in draft. It's very frail, but just the output that Spectrier offers, I think, is really strong. Thwackey for the grassy terrain is certainly not a bad thing. And I do think of like those kind of middle stage Evo Pokemon, Thwackey's definitely one of the more viable ones in draft. Torterra, we'll see. I mean, it can Shell Smash. And then Duocean gives you kind of a nice little Trick Room kind of thing. I think my big issues with this team is Trick Room matchup and a few type overlap weaknesses, and that's the main things. Like, I know that seems kind of short, but that's kind of what it is. I think that some of the Trick Room matchups are going to be really hard for it, and I think that and I think it gets around that in a lot of ways with priority and good bulk, but I don't know if that's going to actually be enough in practice. And I do think that the kind of the lower end, I think the Torterra Duocean don't offer a whole ton to the team. And I think that those could be kind of different picks. And I do know that Torterra gets Grassy Glide with Thwackey. Ooh, spooky. Okay.
So yeah, I think this team does one thing really, really well, and it's Qianpao with priority. Like,
yeah, Blitz.
It is so good at this. This team really doesn't want to face Farigiraf.
No, or Psychic Terrain.
Or Psychic Terrain, which I think knocks it down a little bit, because I think those become very hard matchups for this team with what it's doing. Like, obviously, its Pokemon are generally good besides just their priority things, but that's clearly what this team is best at. And it doesn't need as much speed control because it's got all this priority coming out. I do think that there are some type overlap weaknesses. It might lean a bit too physically heavy. Like, the move Will-O-Wisp looks really good into this team, just in general. I get that it's got Iron Jugulus Spectrier as well. I've been a bit underwhelmed by Spectrier this generation. I thought it was awesome last generation. This generation in draft, it just seems like Snarl bait a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And 130 speed actually isn't that fast when there are so many Pokemon that can boost your speed above it. But I do think Iron Dragos is a great Tailwind setter, a good support option with this team. So yeah, this is a team that I really like. Wouldn't be surprised if they made a really strong run in playoffs with it. But I think that it's very good at one thing, and if you can shut that one thing down with something in prep, it becomes a lot harder for this team to adjust, which is my main issue with it.
Mm-hmm.
But moving on to team number 5, we've got the Wagamama Highway Quazzas. I butchered that.
I'm not saying that.
Okay, that's fine. So this team, we've got the Ogerpon Hearthflame, the Kingambit Iron Bundle Garchomp, Clefable, Mienshao Kilowattrel, Mischievous Grookey. First of all, you gotta love Garchomp Kilowattrel as a combo.
That's Disquick.
One of the best Disquick combos in the format. Iron Bundle is the fastest thing in the format and can give good speed control even if you don't want to go Kilowattrel Tailwind. Kingambit's good setup or bulky option. Ogerpon Hearthflame has good flexibility as either a support option or an offensive option. Clefable is a really good support option that completely ignores anything that's set up. Mienshao is perennially underrated, and then Mischievous is a pretty solid Violite user that can just come in and be annoying. So there's a lot to like with this team. It's got massive offensive output, it's got really good fast modes, but again, this is a team that seems very soft to Trick Room, with the answers being Mischievous and Kingambit. And if you're able to flowchart a way to get Trick Room up consistently against this team, suddenly it's a lot less threatening. So I think it checks a lot of the boxes. I think the type combos are pretty solid. I think the output is great immediately and has some good setup options. I think it's got some modes with the Disquake, the Tailwind options, but just its slow matchup is a bit questionable for me. But what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I would agree that some of the slow matchup's a little questionable. I do think that this team can work around it better than some of the other teams we've been critiquing for that. Kingambit alone can make Trick Room really obnoxious. And you have 2 redirectors with Clefable and Ogerpon to soak hits to stall turns, and generally this team has pretty good bulk, which is nice. One other thing I like about this team is that, especially if you're kind of running like the full aggro Kilowattrel, Garchomp, Bundle, Gambit. One thing I actually really like about that is that Gambit's like Supreme Commander can get really good actually. More even, like obviously Defiant's going to be what you run on it a lot, but even just like the ability to have like a really aggro hyper offense mode where you can just sack Mons and get tons of damage off, and then King Gambit comes in the end and clicks Sucker Punch twice and you win. I think is really nice. Yeah, the damage output from this team is really good. I think one of the things is I like and I like Mischievous too for having Levitate to let Garchomp click Earthquake as well. I do think one element of the team that I'm a little not necessarily skeptical of, but something to keep in mind is that I do think a lot of these Mons have kind of like you click the move sort of answers. Like Garchomp Kilowattrel's the lead. It's like, okay, I'm gonna click an Ice move, you know? Forcing Kingambit to Terra to get out of its fighting weakness, forcing Iron Bundle to not get killed by a Electro Web in the wind, you know. I do think there's a little bit of an element of that to this team, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's going to handle those concerns fine. But I do think, other than the slow matchup, that was the other thing I noticed, was it was like, this is a really good team, but there are ways in which it can really struggle into certain types of leads. I also think this team is generally a little soft to fairy types, which is bad. You don't want to be soft to fairy types, in my opinion. Because King Gambit only has a neutral matchup into them, and then you look at the rest of the team, and then the Ogerpon helps a lot. The Ogerpon's carrying that resist, but then you kind of go down the team and play, oh, okay, Dazzling Gleam looks really strong here. So...
Yeah, and I think we're really parsing hairs when it comes to these top 5 teams. I think they're all incredibly solid teams, and just finding some things that are differentiating factors, like the slight type issues or the poor matchup to slow modes. It's really parsing hairs when it comes to the top 5 teams in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree with that. These teams are all very solid.
But moving on to team number 4, I'll let you take the Texas Togedemaru's.
Yeah, I like this team. This team's cool. Ogerpon Wellspring, Iron Boulder, Regieleki Hitmontop, Enamorous Tea, Chandelure, Duraludon, Servine, Girafarig, Dodrio, Weavile. Now, I am going to say that there are a few picks on this team that I don't understand and should probably be condensed. I think, like, Servine Dodrio, like, I don't really know why that's on the team. But there is a lot of stuff here that I do understand and I do really like and I think is really good. One element that this team has over a few of the other is it's got a very solid potential Trick Room mode with the Enamorous Tea alone is such a beast of a Pokemon. I mean, you don't even need it in Trick Room. You can just like run it with Specs and just click Specs whatever and it will get your kills. Iron Boulder is the, I think, second fastest mon in the format, right? After the Iron Bundle.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you combine that with the fact that this team has Regieleki, and you've got a really, really good fast speed control option. Ogerpon Wellspring, I think, is probably the best like supportive forms of Ogerpon. And I think, and it obviously has really good output too. It's just a good water type with good water grass typing is pretty solid here defensively for it. I think that mon can do a lot. Hitmontop is a great support Pokemon. It's so good to see it back. Intimidate with Feint and Wide Guard and all these other things. Chandelure is actually kind of secretly insane on this team, in my opinion. I actually think that might be one of the best mons. Chandelure is held back by having a kind of meh speed tier, but having like Regieleki helping you with that is going to do tremendous work in terms of getting Chandelure a nice speed advantage. I also think that it can work really well with the Trick Room mode because it actually pivots into Enamorough's weaknesses and Girafarig's weaknesses fairly well. Outside of the dark type weakness that the Girafarig has. I think Girafarig was like 2 points, right?
It was ridiculously cheap, yes.
Yeah, that's such a steal. Like, that's such a good Pokemon to get for that value. The Dodrio, Servine, like I mentioned, I'm not 100% sure what they're doing here. I think Weavile's a really nice, like, fast offensive mon. I actually do think that this team would probably lean towards a more offensive Weavile because it kind of has some overlap in niche with Hitmontop, so I think that it would... I imagine it mostly working offensively on this team. It also gives you some priority, which is nice. Yeah, the big thing with this team, there are some mons... some of the type course stuff, Duraludon also is on the team, and it's good. It's kind of like Chandelure. It has some overlap and roll there, which is fine. One thing with this team that I do think is worth noting is that there are some common type weaknesses shared across the team, not in a big way, but in a notable way. And Girafarig, as good as it is, in my opinion, is not necessarily the most reliable Trick Room setter. I would maybe look into combining that Servine and Dodrio into something that can help bolster the reliability of that Trick Room mode a little bit, because it's very much there and it's very good, and I think the fast mode is just outstanding. I think it's just going to work really well. That's my thoughts. What do you think?
We forgot about Flutter Mane is also faster than Iron Boulder, so it's the third fastest thing in the format.
Third fastest,
and then
okay.
Regieleki, I think, is the fourth fastest thing in the format. But that's still really fast. And this team has a lot of...
That's still insane.
It has a lot of speed control from the Regieleki. It doesn't have Tailwind, and I kind of would have liked to see a Tailwind option so you could go more attack booster, Iron Boulder, get it going a bit more offensively. And I think Enamorous Tea actually has Tailwind, but that's not what you want to be doing with that Pokemon most of the time. But yeah, that's my main general critique. If this team wants to go fast, its output actually isn't insane, and a good ground type outside of the Ogerpon is a bit of an issue for this team at times. Which is probably my biggest issue with it, is that ground types hit a lot of the things on this team really heavily and resist a lot of the stabs. But overall, I think you covered most of the big points. This team can hit very hard. It's got good support options. I would like a bit more consistent Trick Room for the Enamorous therein, but it doesn't need it. You can just Calm Mind up to +6/+6, give it max defense, and then just hit like Draining Kiss.
Once.
Once.
What a dumb Pokemon.
Yeah, it's really good on this team, and getting it in the 5th round is solid. But like I said, this is where we're starting to parse hairs, and I do think the ground weakness is probably the differentiator that keeps this team out of the top 3. But otherwise, it's a very, very solid team all around. But moving on to team number 3, we got the James River Jolteon. I absolutely love this team. It's got Raging Bolt, Tornadus, Entei, Venusaur, Hariyama, Gastrodon, Ninetales, Golurk, Bastiodon, Aipom. So let's start. It's got a Sun mode. It's got Ninetales, Venusaur, and that is terrifying with fast Sleep Powder plus Sun boosted Heat Waves. Sun is just so good this generation. I think Venusaur is a good way to take advantage of it. Plus, you can also just get, Sacred Fire in the Sun. And you activate your Raging Bolt.
Synthesis. Yeah, holy moly.
Yeah, and Tornadus, you're just going to give yourself probably the best Tailwind in the format. Whimsicott might disagree, but it's Tornadus because you could also just click Bleak Windstorm if your opponent has Whimsicott in front of you. Hariyama, completely underrated support. Golurk is solid. Bastiodon, you can Terra out of its bad typing, and it has Iron Defense Body Press this generation that it didn't have before, so it's pretty solid. Aipom exists. But Gastrodon also covers for some of this team's weaknesses with the water specifically. So I think this is a very well-constructed, very powerful team. I wish it had a Trick Room setter, again, for stuff like, I think that Golurk plus Hariyama would be a very solid Trick Room mode. I wish it had a better way to get Trick Room. But otherwise, this is a well-constructed, well-thought-out, well-put-together team that knows what it wants to do, has a bunch of different ways to do it, and it's going to put Sun up, and Sun is really good.
Yeah, Sun is... I don't think it's like a huge argument that Sun is probably the best weather right now. And I think this team abuses it very well. Just having the big thing that gives Sun an edge right now is that with Photosynthesis and some of the other abusers, you can get very good type variety on a Sun team. I also like that this team has Torn and Ninetales on the same comp, because not only is that the Tailwind, but that's also the ability to override people's attempts to shut down the Sun, which I really like. I actually think that's like my favorite feature of the team, is that it can do that. It also actually functions fine in rain too. Like Torn can actually just set rain, and then Raging Bolt and Gastrodon can just, have fun. So I think that also was a good selling point. I would agree with you. I think the slow mode needs a little bit of help. I think the support pieces the team has are very good for what this team's trying to do, but it doesn't have a lot of meaningful counterplay. So this is a team that's kind of designed to bull you over a little bit. Like, the point is, like, lead really strong mode and then kill everybody. The only thing that I'm worried about is, and I think the Torn provides 90% of that counterplay, but there's like a 10% of a TR mode and a 10% of a this that I think is a little worrying, in terms of just like being able to ensure 100% that your mode's gonna go off. You know what I mean? And yeah, I also, Bastiodon, Golurk, Aipom, I think they're all fine. I don't know how much I like Golurk on this team. That might be slightly controversial. I wonder if, because it kind of shares a typing with the Gastro, I do wonder if there was something else that could be taken there that could maybe help out a little bit. But I do really like this team. I think it's going to do very well.
Yeah, very solid team. And I will take a look at the Drippy Dreepies with the resolution for the logo that I was able to find. Obviously high quality. But let's talk about the team itself. So you got Chi-Yu, Thundurus, Regidrago, Indeedee F, Iron Crown, Gyarados, Drifblim, Bruxus, Vulpix, Golem A. This team rocks.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's the amount of offense you can get with like Chi-Yu, Regidrago, insane. The amount of offense you can get with Iron Crown, Indeedee, insane. What if you Indeedee faints because you followed me, something killed it, but your Iron Crown got to +1 through a Calm Mind, and then you send out Chi-Yu, and then you can just click Expanding Force. Like, this team puts so much Terra pressure on the opponent, you don't know if you need to Terra Fairy or if you need to Terra Dark. I guess Terra Steel is a bit of middle ground, but if you Terra Steel, then you're just clicking Terra Steel in front of a Chi-Yu team, which is not necessarily the best. You've got really good speed control because Drifblim gets up Tailwind all the time. It's functionally impossible to stop Drifblim from getting up Tailwind without Prankster Taunt. And if you do that, you got Prankster Thunderous with Thunderwave options, or you can play Offensive Thunderous if you want, but I do think the Prankster set's going to be better with this team. Bruxish would actually stop the Prankster Taunt from coming out if you want to. Like, this team is just very well put together. It knows what it wants to do, and is incredibly strong. The only reason I think this team is number 2 instead of number 1 is that the first ranked team is very powerful, and this team is so specially focused that Assault Vest or other things that boost special defense look just incredible into this team a lot of the time. The Gyarados mitigates that to some extent, but not a lot. But just the output that this team can, like, this team probably has the highest damage output in the league.
Oh, yeah.
Really good offensive modes, and it's got Trick Room Indeedee and Tailwind Drifblim, so you can threaten both speed controls on lead. So there's just so much that this team can do that makes it so hard to prep into. So there's no question in my mind that this team is phenomenal.
Yeah, this was when you sent me the list the first time, and I was looking at the other teams. This is the first one I DM'd you about. I was like, holy moly. This team immediately caught my eye, and I knew going in it was either going to get the number 1 or 2 slot into the PRs, like, just at a glance. It's just really strong, and it's very obviously strong in a really nice way. I do have a couple slight points on it though, and it's actually the only real reason it's number 2. One, there is a fair amount of opposing terrain in the divisions, even if it's lower tier terrain like the Thwackey. But I do think this team relies a surprising amount on Indeedee to activate itself. Yeah. And I do think that, so you have counterplay there, and then I was looking at Psy-Spam teams. One of the things I always do when I'm not trying to I'm trying to look broadly at Psy-Spam into other teams, right? Because sometimes you'll end up in a division where nobody drafts a good Dark type, and Psy-Spam just kind of auto wins, and that helps the team a lot. This team, despite being incredibly good, I did notice there is a pretty decent number of solid Dark, high tier good Dark types or good Steel types or even opposing Psychic types that there was enough of them that it ultimately, that was the tiebreaker between 1 and 2 for me, was just essentially it had nothing to do with the draft itself. It just had to do with how did other people draft, and how does this matchup look compared to the matchup of the number 1 team, and that's what ultimately led me to decide that it got number 2. Very good team though. I really don't have any notes. This team's gonna rule. I'll have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and then the number 1 team, we have my team. I obviously like my own draft, but Ryan is not me while he was critiquing these teams. So Ryan, I'll just let you talk a little bit about my team, so I don't have to talk about why I like what I did.
Yeah, sometimes Dan will give himself number 1 in his own PRs, and I don't know if he actually did this time. I don't know if he gave it to the Treepies or him. I did actually vote this team number 1 though. I think I would have done that even blind as well. And I actually was relatively blind. Dan told me he was playing this league, but I didn't actually pay any attention to the team until it was done, basically. So this team is just, it's kind of silly. So you've got so the thing that this team does really well is that it's just got the capacity to run fast and slow in a really meaningful way. So this is obviously a Sun team, a very hard Sun team. And so you've got Sandy Shocks for your faster mode, and you can pair that with things like the Morgrim and the Lilligant. You can run Torkoal Lilligant, and Walking Wake itself is naturally very fast. So you can naturally get very fast off the bat. It's not the fastest mode, but it's very overwhelmingly powerful in a way in which other fast teams, it's in the attempt to get their speed control, they might lose too many resources, essentially, to get control of the field. And I do think that the Lilligant, especially just having that speed, is just such a huge threat. And then you have this outstanding Trick Room mode. Screamtail Torkoal, the Dust Noir as well. You combine that with the Brute Bonnet, and all of a sudden, like you're sitting pretty in Trick Room, and the Trick Room mode is incredibly threatening. Screamtail is one of the best support mons in the game. I normally don't love a ton of like photosynthesis stacking, but I think this team actually does it really well, because it does have some other ways that it can a lot of these mons do get Sunny Day, so you can always kind of just slap a Sunny Day on something to get yourself back in weather control. And there's not a lot of opposing weather, which was the other thing, because I think you actually have a good matchup into the other Sun team in the division, and then the only other weather that was drafted was Hail. Sun does good into Hail. That's just kind of a fun fact for everybody listening. The part of it too is that there just wasn't a lot of opposing ways to instantaneously stop this team. Like, there's no rain team. There's nothing that like directly I think has an opposing mode that instantly gives you an advantage over this. Morgrim was ridiculously cheap on this tier list, if I remember right, and it's such a good partner for this team. You can even just like lead Morgrim Walking Wake and just profit. Brute Bonnet's a really solid Pokemon. Knucklestack is goofy. I know that we've seen it get used a few times in some drafts for
It's a bad Pokemon, but it'll win a surprise game every once in a while.
Yeah, it's fun. But yeah, I mean, this team overall is just gouging fire in photosynthesis boosted attack in Sun is going to be a lot. I don't think that mon is necessarily like super crazy outstanding outside of Sun, but on this particular team, it's really good. My biggest complaint about the team is type weaknesses. I think the type weaknesses on this team, there's a lot of overlapping typing, and that's just kind of comes with having a Sun team. I think the other Sun team did a much better job of accounting for that, and they have a lot less overlapping weaknesses, but I think that your team's mode itself is a lot stronger, which is why I think it got #1. It's just a lot more pressure offense, and it's a lot more like it's got a dimension to it that really helps it kind of stick out from the crowd. So yeah, I think that I was between this and the Dreepies for #1, but I ultimately decided, mostly just based on matchups into other coaches, I felt like you had the overall slightly better matchup into the overwhelming point amount of your division, despite your team having a few, I think, extra weaknesses over the Dreepies.
Yeah, I can agree with a lot of that. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, can you talk a little bit about Dusknoir versus Dusclops?
Yeah, I will. Wait, why?
There was some discussion in the general chat about the decision to take Dusknoir when Dusclops for 4 points more was still on the board.
Yeah, no, you take Dusknoir every time. That's standard. Like, so like that to me feels like very like I'm a VGC player. And not necessarily in like the meanest way, but if you've been playing draft for a really long time, Dusclops is a really awesome mon in standard play, for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that you don't know you're going to play a Dusclops until you hit team preview. And that's one of the main reasons why Dusclops is so good in standard ladder. In draft, you know what your opponent has and what is coming, and that alone makes Dusclops a lot easier to play around in a draft format, because the problem to get the most out of its bulk, it needs to run Eviolite. Which is fine. Eviolite's a good item, and there's lots of NFE mons on here that are on this tier list. In fact, Morgrim's on this list, and I would say Morgrim should usually run Eviolite, not always, but a lot of the time. And so Eviolite inherently isn't bad, but on a Pokemon that wants to support its team, it's like, okay, I'm just going to click the taunt button. So the problem with Dusclops is that it's too easy to prep around just clicking taunt into it. And then if you decide that you're actually going to run Mental Herb to get around the taunt, well, now all of a sudden Dusclops doesn't have that incredible bulk that makes it so good in standard play. So you're better off just grabbing Dusknoir because it has a better bulk without Eviolite, and you can run Mental Herb on it, and it has more offensive pressure than the Dusclops. So it's not really like Yes, in standard play, Dusclops is better than Dusknoir. In draft, they're roughly equivalent. Some people would say, most people would agree that Dusclops is slightly better despite those flaws. But for a 4 point difference and for the mons that you're getting with those 4 points, I would definitely argue that Dusknoir was the right call here. So,
Yeah, I just thought that that was interesting thing that was discussed some in general, as well as what I was going to pick after Gouging Fire because I was out of Protosynthesis Pokemon to draft, and then I just took Brute Bonnet a few points later, just to make the point. But our final rankings, we've got the Alexandria Arcanines, then Drippy Dreepies, James River Jolteon, Texas Togedemaru's, Wagamama Highway Quazzas, Carolina Roaring Moon, Columbus Cavalions, Olympique Flygons, Toronto Tinkaton, Sacramento Nidokings, Winnipeg Blue Blastoise, and Green Bay Pikachus. Do you have any closing thoughts, Ryan?
No. I mean, like we said at the beginning, none of the teams here are bad. I've done PRs with, I've done plenty of PRs where a lot of the teams are, strictly bad or not good. I think, especially on this, with how powerful this tier list was allowed to be, I think any of these teams can take it home. I don't know how transactions work here, but a lot of teams get better with one transaction, and I do think that that's important to keep in mind. And I always tell people this, but make sure you play with your teams. PR videos, sometimes I see people who act really rashly after a PR. They're like, oh no, I'm number 16 out of 16. I need to really change everything about my team right this second, and they blow all their transactions early, and then they have a bad season because because you should play with a team that's comfortable to you first, and you should see if any of the issues brought up in these PRs are as big of issues as we think, because we're theory crafting here. And you should let yourself play with that team. You should let yourself enjoy playing with that team, and then you should adjust that team throughout the season as you keep playing. As someone who has ranked very low in PRs and very high over the course of my draft career, I will tell you that it's important to always keep an open mind, and it's important to also just play your team and then see what it needs. Don't just make a decision based on what we say. Make your choices based on what you think and what you experience as you're playing with your team. Treat it as a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching. If you think I got something wrong, just let me know in the comments section below. But other than that, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to the season, and I will see you guys when I upload my Week 1 match. Have a nice one. Bye.